sometimes profound things happening during the week, and we have this, very clear idea of what we're going to talk about on the show, like the space shuttle blew up, or we struck pay dirt on Mars, or something crazy like that. But other weeks, it's a series of jabs, series of base hits, things that happen, things that just make you say, and sometimes our own personal rabbit holes lead to our topics of the week. So this week we have several maybe offbeat topics, but all addressed by some very smart people. So today on the Black Futurist, as you know, and as usual, we have Dr. Mo Dolberry and Chef Brent Hughes. My first question to Chef Brent Hughes is, Chef Brent Hughes, do you like it when I call you Chef Brent Hughes? Or should I call you something else that reflects that you're an engineer and you've been to the moon and other things?
Brent encompasses everything.
Okay. Brent.
I
Brent.
don't need to be Chef Brent.
You don't want to be Chef Brent?
I don't need.
Okay.
I don't need to be Chef Brent.
One thing I want to say about our background and where that leads us, and we've mentioned it before, is on the screen of my phone, I have a picture of 10 DeLoreans in the real picture's like a DeLorean junkyard. So there's like 10 DeLoreans there, but I keep it on my screensaver because of the idea, once a time traveler, always a time traveler. To me, it represents like a by myself meeting. 10 versions of me all converging on one spot to meet each other, right, and, kick it. Right. And the other side is once an engineer or scientist, always an engineer or scientist. So no matter who you are after that training, you tend to see the world in a way that gives you and informs your processes. Would you guys agree?
Yes. That's kind of what I was like. We're going to talk about engineering. How would you define engineering?
I would define engineering as aggressive problem solving, structured and aggressive problem solving. And, you? Maurice and I had a conversation about engineering is not science and how that gets conflated and that causes problems. You want to say something about that, Mo?
Yeah, to your point about, consistently coming back to how you're oriented, man. Like after this long career in education, I find myself as a data scientist, man. Like back when we were at Howard and all of us were in engineering and then I switched over to biology, it was always something just about the science, about aggressively answering questions. So for me, that switch over to life science was really just about so now I'm aggressively answering questions about human systems rather than physical systems that humans are using. So it's always been that for me. And to your point again, coming back to really at this point in my career right now, focusing heavily on the data science portion, it just reminds me like science is really just this, it's a consensus understanding of how things work. And a scientific process brings you to a consensus understanding of how things work, of course, using evidence from the physical world. So that's not necessarily engineering. It's not necessarily problem solving, because I find myself right as a data scientist, but I'm still really on like the epistemological side of things. I think about knowledge systems and knowledge constructs and how they work together. So what evidence looks like for me, it doesn't look like specifically, quantitative data, bits and bytes, right? It looks like thoughts and processes and that type of thing. So engineering is that sort of part of science. It combines that technical, but it's also specifically trying to solve problems. Sometimes we're just trying to learn about, like science is about learning about stuff for the sake of learning about stuff. Sometimes you're just trying to get better at learning about stuff. You know what I mean? And engineering, like you mentioned, it's an aggressive problem solving. So yeah, it is engineering is scientific, but engineering is absolutely not science.
Brent, I just remembered where this conversation came from. It was right after that submarine that was controlled by the PlayStation controller went kablooey. And we got on the phone and, of course, we were the most sympathetic about those who lost lives there and all that. And then we went directly to blaming the guy who did it. And here's the key line from that conversation. It was, dude, push the engineering. Do not push the science. Like you can push engineering to the next, but you must observe science.
The science.
And he didn't do that. That's where that whole conversation came from.
I'll talk about that, and then I'll get back to the engineering piece. It's fine, and just like I say about certain political figures, it's the guy standing out on the corner screaming crazy stuff is one thing. It's the people that line up to listen to him that are the problem. So if he wants to go on the sub, I think that's that's a great aspiration. But you say you got a solution. Before I get on the sub, I'm gonna. So what is your solution?
Right.
It's not like taking an Uber, right? It's like the car is the established technology. You
Right.
got this whole new thing, and you're telling me you can go. All right, let's run down there empty real quick and see what, and pull it back up and see what happens.
Right.
And I'm paying you for this privilege?
Bro.
No, I mean, we all make bad decisions, and I guess it's a continuum. That was a horrible decision on the part of him, like you said, regard to the engineering and science, and them on deciding that he was worth trusting.
Yeah.
So,
The word is
eh,
hubris that always comes to mind regarding that whole thing for me.
yeah. And so I'm sometimes literal, and I often say words have meaning. So I went to Google, what is engineering? As an engineer, I was like, like little things like trying to define the word. And I love the second definition was skillfully or artfully arranging for an event or situation to occur. Okay, I like that because, and then kind of lending into what you guys were talking about, science. Science is understanding the thing. Engineering is applying those understandings to creation.
Right.
I think that's how we could bring that together.
I love the art part there too, because was at really the tip of the spear when we made that change from STEM to STEAM and understanding, you know, just from a simple standpoint, right? Like if I'm going to buy a house, if I want a house that I'm going to live in, sure, it's just going to literally provide the shelter of food and clothing, and it'll probably house my food and my clothing. But in terms of everything else, it's got to have aesthetics. It's not just a bunch of squares. You know what I mean? Yeah, like your house, you want to like to live in it, and so that part of engineering, that part in particular of like architecture, that's an artistic part.
Mm-hmm.
All those aspects and things that we, different ways that we've learned to understand it now, how feng shui has just become a normal part of
Mm-hmm.
lexicon, but understanding that as a function of art, science, and
Mm-hmm.
engineering, and engineering for human design to, for example, specifically navigate and create the outcome that this person is not only going to have shelter for their food and clothing, but they're going to literally
Mm-hmm.
like where they lay their head to
Right.
rest, where they walk
Right.
in and,
Right.
spend their time.
Right. And y'all are comic book guys, and I saw this thing today. I'd seen it before, but it was teaching STEM without teaching humanities is how you get Spider-Man villains. Teaching a
Mm.
theater without teaching humanities is how you get Batman villains. I
You've
think
got
it was
to. I've
different. It
got to
was
slow
different
that.
though. I think it
I
was
have to
flipped.
slow
I
it
think it was
way
flipped. I
down.
think it was flipped. I
Slow
think
it
it's
way
supposed to
down.
be, huh?
Slow it way
What's that?
down and give me an example.
Nah, it's
Well,
fantastic. You said it right the first time.
again, I'm not the comic book guy, but the first thing that popped in my mind was Dr. Octopus.
Yes.
It was like, okay, he's a scientist without questions. He's an engineer without question. But do you use your powers for good? And why don't you?
Hmm.
Because you spend all your time in the science library and never read a book, a
Mm.
fiction book or a novel, or painted anything, or and then talking about systems. That was one thing when I did start doing food. That's one thing that I learned. It was like it's all a system. You have your formulas, your recipes, you put them together in a certain way. And again, when I started cooking, it wasn't, the art was there in the creation side, but not on the presentation side. So learning how to present it is the art. And there's science. You can't deny the science that goes into food, but
Shout
the
out to
art
Alton
part of
Brown.
it is the creation and the presentation.
Right. Hey, we have a few topics that we've listed out that we want to talk about. I'm going to throw the first in the pot because I think it's interesting. It was regarding electric vehicles. Maurice, you have an electric vehicle. And we know there are several real differences between combustion vehicles and electric vehicles, most of which are in everybody's face. But there's one key difference that really strikes my inner civil engineer, and that is the weight of the vehicle.
Mm.
Right? Like,
It's. I was just gonna say, I got to re up right now in terms of my vehicle registration in the state of Washington charges, and it's hundreds of dollars for the extra weight to
uh,
register electric vehicles. So my vehicle registration,
Mm.
I've got a Ford Explorer that's 2018 and
Mm.
the 21 Tesla, and it is triple the amount to register the
Holy
Tesla,
crap.
and in no small amount, and if not most of that charge is due to what the state charges because of the extra weight of the
Right.
vehicle.
Right.
Is that wear and tear on the roads, or what is the
I
reason?
Yeah.
think I think it's like gas prices, at the station. There's really I don't know how much science they've done to calculate how much extra wear and tear those of us
Hmm.
with heavy ass electric vehicles are actually putting. I think it's a way to, one, collect a lot of money, and
Hmm.
two, I'm not immediately suspicious about all taxes, man. I was left, and I'll pay my taxes as it comes politically, right? So I
Hmm.
think in this case, they actually might be able to. They'll have more than enough money to preempt any issues that happen once vehicle fleets have shifted to mostly electric, and now all of this concrete that's been poured has to hold much more weight over time. I think they will have more than enough money to invest in the research and development to make sure as they repour concrete and everything else. So I think the tax is a lot, but I think it's good to think of it preemptively, right? So
Yeah, yeah. My brother is thinking about getting one now. So.
There's a couple things. Let me put the civil engineer hat back on. Now I'm going to take you back to the late 90s. I'm in grad school, and there was a guy named Ed Martin who was a civil engineering professor at Howard University, and he was telling us then that this was coming. He says electric cars are coming or smart cars are coming, and we don't know how it's going to happen. We don't know if there's going to be sensors in the road. We don't know if there's going to be infrared between the car and the car in front of you, but automatic braking will come, route detection will come, and all these features that just were at the time super, futuristic in thinking. And there were multiple different arguments about what would happen. Simultaneously, or let's say before that, go back 3 years, 3 or 4 years, you're a freshman civil engineering major. And one of the classes you're taking is statics. All right. I think you guys probably had to take that too. It's
Yep.
the couple classes that we all kind of take interdisciplinary classes as engineers. One of them is statics and others dynamics. So things in motion or
Hmm.
things that are still. And just linking those ideas together, one of the things you study in statics is bridge design, truss design.
Mm.
Okay, so here's the question. If a bridge built in or designed in the 1920s is designed to carry certain number of cars at a certain average car weight with a factor of safety that says if the cars have load in them, or if there's a traffic jam for some reason, how many cars can go on this bridge is a calculation that every engineer is making and double checking. What happens when you jump forward 100 years and the cars are now 1,000 pounds heavier? It's very similar to riding through Georgetown or many neighborhoods in the Northeast United States where an overpass is too short. Single lane bridge or double used to be a 2 lane bridge is now, you bring a Hummer across, it's a single lane bridge. Or an overpass is too short, or a house you buy in Georgetown, the garage is made for what car are you going to get in there? Right,
Hmm.
that's made for workout equipment and shovels. At this point you can't get your car in there, right?
it's
So
one
100 years makes a difference is the point.
what comes with the 100 years also is the technology. So, like one of the things we mentioned, artificial intelligence, that the amount of people that we can engage. So, in 1920, in the United States, when they're building a bridge, I live coincidentally close to the joint, the bridge that you see was doing the wave, and all of that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a
you
horrible
Mm.
know,
thing.
Hmm.
right. I live pretty close, relatively speaking, to that bridge. And if it was built in the 1920s, and I could be off, but I think it's 1920s. If it was built in the 1920s, then their ability in terms of human resources would have been limited to local engineers. They could have written letters to other engineers and other bridge builders. They would
Mm.
bring books
Pony
that those other
Express.
engineers, right. Mail was primarily going to come on a train. There were no planes, right? So now, if you are going to answer that question, how many thousands of pounds of vehicles can this bridge withstand over the next 40 years, you can go on to your smartphone and immediately start talking to and with engineers in Tokyo and engineers
That's
in
right.
Beijing and in New Delhi, right? And immediately draw on that expertise as a function of the technology proliferating too. So I think to that point, yeah, and it limits you in time, like you talk about being a time traveler before, right? Like it limits you in time how far ahead you can actually calculate. 1920,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they could think realistically to 1940. With
Mm.
artificial intelligence, able to supplement and push us to think even further, we might
Mm-hmm.
actually be able to think 50 years in the future in terms of roadways and weight of vehicles.
Yeah.
That's what one thing my wife says all the time is, we always have traffic. We live in Southeast. So going quote unquote into the city, there's
Not the
always traffic.
southeast of the United States, but Southeast DC.
Southeast DC, Mo.
Yeah.
So we so there's always traffic on 295. They updated 295, but when you actually get to the point where you're doing the construction, your analysis is 15 years old, right? So you're building this road
Mm.
for the amount of traffic you thought you were going to have 10
Right.
years ago. Then we know
Right.
how things shift exponentially, especially here, folks moving out to, Maryland from the city, or more people moving to Maryland or Virginia that are coming into the city. It's not that plan. And I'd never, until you just said that weight thing, I always thought about the amount of traffic. I never thought about the weight of the vehicles, right?
Right.
So
That's super smart, and love to have that conversation with you. Here's the next one. This is based on an article that I read one morning in my morning reading. It was, what is the fastest way to load an airplane? Because it's always like once a year, depending on what you're reading, it'll come up like, why don't they load airplanes from the back? Not meaning from the back door, but saying, why is it that people with children, then the military, then the people who paid a lot more money than I did, and before I get on and I'm in seat 29, right? Why aren't we loading starting from the back row forward? That argument comes up once a year in my reading for sure. But something new. This year, an astrophysicist sought to answer the problem using AI to do multiple iterations. Go ahead and insert the gif here of Dr. Strange's head going like this all over the place and then coming out. He found the way, the one way to most efficiently load an airplane. So I want to ask you guys, what are your solutions before I tell you what astrophysicist Jason Hiram Steffen's solution is?
Okay, I'll go first because I'm gonna offer the non-engineering. I'm gonna think in terms of like human beings, right? And try to think in terms of how humans behave and respond. My guess would be, if I'm just trying to think off the top, wide open, you know what? I'm gonna go out there. Maybe it's just to get people to line up in any order and get them onto the plane as quickly as possible, right?
Okay.
See, it might end up to just the like total entropy in the system, right? So let me work backward from there. I'm gonna kind of guess and say that it's got to be some sort of combination of when you put people onto the plane, and I think that's probably more important as to where, right? So I'm thinking that it's that his solution is going to be something more towards the time and how you use the time, and not towards whether it's back to front.
Okay. What
There,
you got,
I land.
Hughes?
First, I thought you were talking about loading luggage onto the plane. So thanks for that clarification. But I mean, that's why I let him go first, because I wanted to think about it. So back to front makes sense, but people don't make sense. As soon as you put people into the equation, it doesn't matter.
Well,
we'll find a way to screw it up.
You should stop there, because that is actually the breaker of every equation, right? You're 100% right. No matter what I say next, it could never happen because people, unless it's like we go to the stereotypical communist country and, you got to do exactly as they say when they black bag you.
People know how to stand in queue.
Right. Shout out to Southwest. Right. Here's how you increase If you take the people factor out of people not doing what they're supposed to do, here's how you decrease the loading time of an airplane by up to 30%, according to astrophysicist Jason Hiram Steffen and his AI models. First, you load in every passenger in an odd number row who's sitting in a window seat. And then you load every passenger sitting in an even number row sitting in a window seat. Then you do every odd number row middle seat, even number row middle seat. So you're loading the plane from the outer edges in, which increases the speed of loading by up to 30%, according to his computer models.
That makes sense.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Now you know it's not going to work, because as we go to any airport today, there's people who don't care what zone you just called. And there's people who believe that, because I paid, or not even believe, but who are affirmed that because I paid more, I deserve to get on first, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That was my thing. So you let in the people with children, the people that need assistance, the military, and the people that pay.
Right.
And that is, well, aside from how we treat differently abled people, that's how society works. If you're the military, we're going to salute you and give you these little bit of privileges. If you got money, we're going to give you privileges. If you're just an average person, get in where you fit in. That's and it, like as you said, if we could also reset society and the way we approach things, then yeah, that would be a great solution.
This is how you go from wanting to be a mechanical engineer to being a critical race theorist. Because you
You
look
really
at
want to solve the problem.
society, right? Because you look at society and you say, man, even when it comes to loading a doggone airplane, we still create a caste system based on capitalism or race. We are going to find a way
We
to
are going to
segregate.
delineate. We are
And
going to delineate. Yes.
literally to the disadvantage of ourselves and against the greatest applications of technology, engineering, and art that we can
That's great.
currently apply. We gotta find a caste system.
The most important thing is that I feel special.
Thank you.
You can achieve whatever you want. It's America.
Yeah.
Can you pay for it?
Yes.
Maurice, there's a show that we enjoyed very much. I don't know if Brent has watched it. It's called For All Mankind. It's coming up with the new season. They released a trailer. When I told you guys we were going to be talking about engineering, I asked you to submit your topics in advance. And one of the topics you said was travel to the moon and Mars and reimagining society through it, which I assume is an allusion to For All Mankind. Is it not?
100%. 100%.
Please go in.
So I was reminded of this exercise when I was, probably and maybe in middle school. So it's a really, really old exercise that has ended up in a lot of like diversity, equity, and inclusion training and stuff. And within this exercise, you're picking people to go on a mission to the moon. And so you are given these different profiles of people by their age, their occupation, their general disposition. And it's an exercise to get you to think, because initially, of course, the first thing you think of, we need to breathe, survive on the moon. So we need astronauts, we need, every type of scientist to make sure that we can live, and then you start thinking, okay, well, we need food. All right. So now we need botanists. And then at a certain point, you really have to come to this sort of decision like, hey, man, we got to figure out rules for our society. Because even if we have food, clothing, and shelter, like I always talk about the United States, we're going to create a caste system. So we're going to find a way to prioritize people based on something other than scientific reason, right? Why we're going to prioritize people. And so thinking back to that thought exercise, one of the archetypes that they had, again, this is how old this was, it was like 45-year-old Baptist preacher, from a church in the South. It was a Jesse Jackson type, Martin Luther King type archetype. And I remember being one of the few people like, yes, pick this person. And amongst my white, at the time in private school, amongst my white classmates, and this is not an indictment of them because they're white. It's an indictment of how we privilege whiteness, right? And they're like, why would you have to bring this dude? I'm like, how are we going to get along? And so in terms of the technology and travel, as we think, like, as look, and I've said this, I would love for and assume that with the proliferation of technology, my kids are going to be able to travel back and forth from the moon, right? And I would assume that they're going to be people who are resident during their lifetimes, right? So we have to decide what the rules are going to be. It can't be like on For All Mankind, to circle back to it. Well, the United States got here first, so it's going to be U.S. rules right here on this. Well, North Korea is here. Sorry for those of you who don't watch the show. North Korea is here, and they got this rules, and they can establish it. And so now we end up recreating the same balkanized dumb shit that we do now, right? And so we immediately create this competitive arena where we can, if you get the social scientists involved, along with the engineers, we can start to rethink how we want to engineer human society. If we had a chance to do it all over again, from where would we start? Including the technology and the engineering and the mathematics, but who would we want to be as a people? It becomes a way more important question than how do we eat.
When does this become an issue? Does it become an issue when we have 10x or 100x times the people that are in the International Space Station? Because right now they're there, they've been there, they rotate in and out. There are people from all over, all different countries, and I never hear any soft scientists going. It's always the hard scientists. So when does this become an issue? Is it an issue with 10 people? Is it an issue with 100 people? Is it an issue with 1,000 people? What do you think is the cutoff or the cutoff?
It's already an issue.
It's already an issue.
Let me offer you this. As of right now, for those of us who love Star Wars, Star Trek, right? And you understand that first contact happened because Zephram Cochrane was able to bump into some Romulans, right? Into some Vulcans, excuse me. Right?
Now you've exposed me as the nerd. Go ahead.
The person right now in September of 2023 positioned to be Zephram Cochrane for humanity is Elon Musk, because we have largely put into the hands of private citizens exploration and travel into space. And so he's not subject to any rules, right? And I don't know what rules he should be subject to or anyone else, but it's like For All Mankind, where once you start letting the private sector set the precedent, once we defunded NASA and everything else, and now made it so that the government is like third, fourth, and fifth behind individual people. So now, like, hey, man, you run into the Martians, it's Elon Musk and whoever he wanted to be on the spaceship with him, ostensibly, right? Like, so when did it start? It started once regular ass people were able to put ships into the, into the atmosphere and into orbit.
That's interesting. Where you got, Brent?
I think that's it's interesting because I have to assume there are issues on the space station now. That's just I know humans. There's something.
You think they're going into the fridge and eating each other's lunch? Who ate my cupcakes?
I don't think it's that. It's good, but but again, it's also I'm gonna look towards the better natures and assume that the folks that go there are already open to living in that system. It's to Mo's point. It's when you get the first class ticket, the person that can afford to go, and they paid this money, and they have this right, and they have this expectation that, I mean, and why would they expect anything else? Any other time I pay money, I get kid gloves, and I can demand what I want.
Are we imagining there's an ensuite in the International Space Station, and only the highest paying country gets the in-suite bathroom?
There's a VIP section, bottle service, all of that. That's what I think. You can't wait for the issue to arise. You got to define the rules before you have the option to walk through the door.
Right.
But even
Brent,
even when you do that, even when you do that, you're gonna, you know, people go people.
People gonna
this is
people.
why I always thought differently about who should be in space. Brent, I think poor people should be in space. And right, I think they should be the first ones. And if you think about it, the way our system has always been designed, you had to be an astronaut to get to space. So you had to have training. You had to be able to pay, or someone had to sponsor you for this expensive ass training. And so it means that you are either rich, or rich people somehow identify you as someone that they want to send into space, or the rich government, right? So in terms of who should be in space, yeah, man, I was the dude who's like, yeah, put the pastor in space. I think poor people should be the first ones in space, because they'll be like, man, wait, who should get what? Wait, who should get the freeze dried ice cream first? Why?
I
Mm.
don't
We all
know.
gotta eat.
Man, I don't know. The only way that works and we've gotten really brainy in this part. The only way that works is if there's also poor people in mission control, because that removes caste and class from the decisions made. Otherwise, you say the value of life has gone down in the people in the can,
Right.
and
We can
now
take
we can
more
crash
risks.
that one and start another one. Yeah,
Well, we can fly with a PlayStation controller.
circle back.
Because they're poor. Because we will trend towards caste
Yeah.
system.
That's why I said the only way.
And
The only way
again,
putting
that goes back to, of course, they're gonna give us the vaccine first.
That's
Y'all
why
expendable.
if you're gonna say
Y'all
put poor people up first, then it's got to be a poor person at mission control
Yeah.
as well, which
Yeah.
equalizes that thing.
Okay, poor people and the president.
100%.
Balance
100%.
There
it
you
out.
go. That's pretty good.
There's a
Balance it
Balance.
there's a system, there's an idea, there's a notion that the president should be selected at random from the population, right? That
Ouch.
could be a piece, that could be a piece of the selection process. I think to
Mhm.
think the opposite way, right? Because we literally have 46 examples of the opposite. It's literally been someone who was born rich. Like, you have to be absurdly wealthy and white and male to be the president. So to think of it, it should be a totally random person. That's just as bad as what we have now in terms of, how's it going to
Well,
turn out?
right. And
I don't
that's
think you've gotten more qualified people by letting it be rich white dudes.
no, not
And
at
that's
all.
what they bring. Like, that's one of the things that for all mankind is so dope, because it challenges that. No, like, the idea that 46 presidents since the United States has existed, it's had 46 presidents, and there hasn't been a single human female who has ever existed on this soil since it existed that should be the president, right? None of
That's
not a single one
insane.
could have been elected.
Right.
Right. And so you have all these gatekeeping mechanisms, and we're way far from
You
having
see,
picked the best people. So yeah, picking people at random,
you
is it
see
gonna be that much worse?
you see what happened when they slipped and got a non-white man. They overcorrected the skid and
Yeah.
pulled in.
Dog, they dug in, bro. And like, we taking the Capitol because Obama was president. I mean, that had nothing to do with Trump. Trump just a proxy. They were like, yo, we taking the government, dog.
Crazy.
It's funny. The thing I think about is, again, humanities, the ship of state in Plato's Republic, is there's people fighting to take over to be the captain. There's a group of guys fighting to be the captain, and one of them will be captain. But the person that should be captain is a guy that's away from the fray with his sextant and his maps and, figuring out, looking at the stars and figuring out what's going on. That's who should be captain.
I don't know.
But he will never be. He will
Now,
never be.
why can't you load the plane most efficiently? Why doesn't the science rule the process? Why? Because people. So I'm not taking the guy with the sextant and the maps. He might be my first officer, but it's got to be somebody who can rule people.
Why?
Because people going people. They'll break the situation to their own detriment.
So let me be more specific. Why do they have to rule people?
What? He just said who should be captain. And
Right.
I'm
Captain,
saying that the person who should be captain must be able to lead people, not just the science.
What's more important to people? But that's not what he's saying. That's not what he's saying. To my understanding, it's you're going to get somebody in charge that won a fight. That has nothing to do with...
Maybe we should rule by committee. We should lead by committee.
But that's the thing. And I think that is a good way to rule, because you will have the guy who is the captain. What is the captain's job? To steer the ship, to drive the ship. And then you have the first mate, or I don't know, the hierarchy or whatever, who is responsible for the people. Right? You have someone responsible for the people, because if you're steering through a tense situation, you're going to have to take care of the ship, but that tension will always also cause problem in the ranks. So you can't do both at the same time. So you'll need somebody else to manage that thing. And I thought about a new solution to the airplane thing too.
Come on.
The first person that gets on and that's a dick, you shoot him in the fucking head, and then you set the tone.
That everybody gets on. It's smooth, very smooth process. But who cleans up? Okay, never mind.
The rest of his family.
Look, it's the notion of why you gotta. So there's a built-in irony in how I'm gonna challenge the notion of ruling people and
ruling
actually, and or even leading and what that means, right?
Mm-hmm.
Captaining people, right? And so what that essentially means is engineering. You are going to lead people to the best overall outcome for everyone, right? And within that overall outcome, there's a bunch of individual outcomes. But if that's the notion of leadership, is you will not just lead, but more importantly, and beyond leading, you will help to ensure. Right. So the leader is thinking in terms of greater good. And so one of the things that happens with 100% back to Brent's point, and to Plato's point, and to the point about the presidency is based on who has a lot of money and is popular. The notion of who leads in that case is captain the ship. It could literally be a fight, right? If it's pirates in the in the Caribbean, right? There's some sort of fight that happens, some sort of election. What's interesting, and why I like For All Mankind, when you put women in leadership positions, or when men step out and finally allow, and I use that term specifically because men shout down women and physically elbow them out of conversations. But when men step back and allow women into leadership, you know what tends to happen less? Fighting. And they tend to think of things in solution-oriented ways that eliminate the need for someone to ultimately be the final person, or a group of people to ultimately be the final people. And it looks like, hey, in certain situations, we need this person or these people to offer these solutions. And then we somehow come up with a democratic, a republic way, a based, a group way, right, to ultimately come back to serving the greater good of all of us. And so women are better at it than men are, in those situations where we see that they are heavily involved. And so that's one of the things that we see on For All Mankind. It's why, in my opinion, they are marrying the social science and the technical science. It's because it's feminized. There are women who are involved, and they're not just like, somebody got to win the fight, somebody's got to win the popularity contest, someone has to persuade or somehow convince them that they themselves should be the leader. And they are circling back to saying, we all need to operate for the greater good. Some of us will take on a leadership role at different times, but this is what needs to happen. And they will lead and catalyze those processes instead.
Moving to the next topic. Before I do, I want to say shout out to Slim Charles, because if you're going to make moves like that, you always need muscle.
I was just thinking about when he killed Cheese. That sentimental motherfucker just cost us money.
You ever watched The Wire?
That popped into my head. I don't know why that popped into my head.
I don't know. We both went to The Wire very fast. All right.
Immediate.
That was for Joe.
Brent Hughes, you want to tell us about, you've been spending a lot of time on AI, dealing with large language models. Before you go into your topic, which is AI, large language model design, and prompt engineering, I want to challenge your thinking for 1 minute that I got this note from Angela Benton. this morning who said that GPTs are already outdated because
and
retrieval augmented generation models are actually the future of AI. Please tell us what these things are and why they're important and where your thinking is on this.
so I saw her post also, and that's when I first heard about retrieval augmented generation also. So my thing is about AI is it's here, and I know a lot of folks have concerns or fear or general ignorance about it, right? So my thing is it's here, so we need to get involved and we need to understand it, and we need to manage our experiences with it. So essentially, everybody, I think it really blew up when we talked about Chat GPT. That's when a lot of folks got exposed to that as a something everybody could touch, right? So I remember a few years ago, IBM Watson came about, and I was like, this seems amazing. This seems like something you could ask anything, and it'll provide all types of information, answer questions, create things. But it was one of those things where you had to apply to get in, and this,
Right.
that, and the third. So I think this is a new thing. So, from
They
my
should have put
understanding,
poor
again,
people and the president in there first.
well, you do have poor people involved in AI because they do a lot of the manual labor, some of the manual labor that's required. So it's not all mechanical. You still have poor people on phones and small devices doing some of the manual labor for pennies. So
Caste
there
system.
we go. And so the thing is, it's when you think about it, you're training a computer to mimic thinking, right? So you have to give it tons of information. You have to package that information in a certain way. And if you take information that's available that has been recorded throughout history, we know that history is written by the winners, and history is written by those who, again, have the privilege to dedicate their lives to research, understanding, and producing things that don't have immediate monetary value. And that is going to create a bias in any system, in every system that we exist. So when people say, you ask for things in ChatGPT and it comes back with something you might consider racist or classist or sexist, it's because it was fed that. So my thing is, the information is the information. You can't change that. But you can change how you ask it questions. So that's the prompt engineering. How you ask the questions kind of dictates what you come out, because it doesn't think. It does some math and
It
says,
calculates. It
based
calculates.
based on
Yeah.
based on the information I have consumed, the question you asked, and the way you ask the question, this is what I can come up with. This is the sentence I'm going to produce based on statistics.
Right. Let me
So it's not thinking.
pause you for 1 second there, because I've introduced you in as many times as you've come on this show as Chef Brent Hughes. I think it's time we actually tell people what your training is and what you do for a living.
I have a BS in electrical engineering. I have an MBA in general studies because I wanted to do entrepreneurship, but that wasn't an option. And I am currently a cloud architect.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And I create things on the side too.
Because whether or not you could make a sauce without breaking it really is irrelevant when it comes to your AI language learning, large language models.
Let me tell you something I did though. I'm playing around. I was talking to a friend that has a restaurant here, and he wanted to do a brunch. So I took his menu, put it in the Chat GPT, and said, "Hey, break out all the ingredients in this menu." So it listed proteins, vegetables, fruits, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, create a brunch menu with 6 items based on what's already on the menu. Add eggs, add something else if you need to. And it came up with a menu. But the most interesting thing to me was the first dish it came up with was a tomato-based egg dish called shashuka. I think that's how you say it.
North
But
African dish.
yeah, and that was the first dish I came up with when I was thinking about it, because it's a pizza place. They got a brick oven, and I was like, you came up with the same idea I had. So there, and again, it's and that's what I want people to think about when they use it. Because I got people ask me, you told Ali to hit me up. I'm like, just ask it questions, and it's not like you ask it a question. If it gives you bullshit back, you know it's bullshit. It's not like you're gonna have to immediately turn this in. Go through that process of, okay, because I've even used it to do some scripting. I was like, hey, I want to set up like the machine I have now. I told it, I was like, you are a experienced cloud architect, and you are building a Linux based system on a Mac, and you want to do this, and this. What do you do? And it broke out. First, you need to da 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 da, and then it actually, for each section, I told it, okay, what are the commands to do that? And it would give me the actual Unix commands to type in to do the things. And if it was different, if I got a different response, I would tell it. I was like, hey, because again, and this where we can get to the RAG part of it. Chat GPT is trained on information from a few years ago.
Right.
And the deal with this new RAG is it will take that information, but it will also go find new information. So it
Is
can
this the
go look out.
beginning? Is this the beginning of Terminator? Is this how it starts?
The Terminator began decades ago, bro. It's not.
But there was a
it's,
stopgap in place, and that was that
what
the
was the
information
stopgap?
was supposed to be old. You couldn't get what happened yesterday, and now it's like, oh well, you're just going to do all the thinking.
So again, talking about engineering is okay. Now I have new information. I have new technology. We have these super GPUs. We have all this information, so we have cloud, environments. So you don't have to build a lab that's millions and millions of dollars to start this thing. You can start it for a free account on any of these cloud service providers, and they all have now some sort of AI, ML service that they provide. And again, we talk about Elon, he owns ChatGPT. We talk about, the companies that are involved in this, that, and the third. But you could make something on your machine that does something, right?
Yeah.
You've got it. You have Alexa, you have Siri, you have all of these things that are already doing it.
Yeah.
So it's not that Terminator been here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask a question because it coincidentally was just having an argument with our friend as usual. Him and I, me and Mariba were arguing, and Lavelle was playing mediator. We were talking specifically about this. We're talking about artificial intelligence, and essentially, and I am probably gonna just because I got the mic, right? It's like, if you heckle the dude on stage,
never heckle the dude on the stage with the mic,
because Mariba ain't here. Shout out to my bro. I offered that there are inherent limitations within artificial intelligence that have to do with, Brent, some of the things that you were talking about, like its ability to discern truth. And I would couch truth in terms of how humans understand truth, which is it's human consensus, right? So one of the limitations inherently, I will argue, of artificial intelligence is it is inherently limited, that it can't come to human conclusions about truth. It can mimic, it can gather as much data about human conclusions. We could end up through Alexa and Siri and all the things that you were talking about, Cortana, we can end up feeding it everything it needs to know to mimic, right? As much about, but it's essentially still not human, because ultimately it's not human. And that to me is a limitation, right? So, and I don't want to mischaracterize his argument. He would say he was arguing more towards this notion that AI is limitless to the point where, it could mimic or even get smart enough to the point where it could surpass human ability to navigate notions of truth. I think
it doesn't
But
have.
here's
It doesn't
the
have
thing,
faith.
though.
There's no faith. It doesn't exist, which is a human superpower. Continue.
Yeah, and I think it's, and even there was an article that came out that ChatGPT got dumber when people started using it.
I bet.
So here's the other part of that. There are a lot of us that are still doing these thought experiments and thinking forward about things, but there are a lot of us that are regressing in terms of intelligence, and we've seen how they can be manipulated by what they consume. So if this machine understands that and it has a desired outcome and it has access to produce things and has access to, so it's again back to people. We collectively are dumb enough to let it happen.
Shout out to Slim Charles, because it will always need muscle. Figure that out.
Hey, and also Slim Charles. The game is the game.
Hey, I think just
Or was that Omar? No,
that was
Omar. That was Omar.
That was Brother Muzone. After Omar shot him, he's laying there bleeding on the floor. He's like, "Don't you want to know why?" He was like, "The game is the game." Like,
Hey, I think one of the most profound ideas that I'm going to take away from this conversation, Maurice, is the idea that we have commercialized space travel and potentially given the first contact ability to whoever could afford to do it, which is scary in itself. And I'll definitely be thinking on that. I have one last topic I want to lay on you guys. It has been with me for about a year now. It's scary, interesting. We'll start with the question, which is the human species the dominant species on the planet? What would you say?
I'd say yes.
Okay.
I think we have
only because we work together. If viruses work together, we would be in trouble.
Okay. All right.
We would be in big trouble.
Immediately. I think humans have, of any species that has ever existed, they have the most direct influence over the planet and the rest of the species on it. Does that make us dominant? There's a argument for that, for sure. But in terms, like, towards Brent's point, right? Once humans are long gone, viruses and bacteria, all 8 of those kingdoms, and it used to be back when it was 5, and it was back now it's archaebacteria and eubacteria and all those different kingdoms of organisms that outnumber us by the trillions will outlive us all. They've been here longer than us, so to an extent, right, the ability to survive forever, that's some dominance for your ass too, right? So
yeah, I think part of it is also intent. Like, are we dominant, quote unquote, because we have the most ill intent or aggressive intent that is outside of the species? These are just questions. But here's the statement that I wanted to kind of share with you, is that roughly the weight of ants on the planet is equivalent to the weight of humans on the planet. You talk about working together. Can you imagine if, Mo, how much do you weigh? About a 180?
Yeah, 190.
Imagine if 190 pounds worth of ants came for you. Who's winning?
Wait,
Siafu.
Dog. Okay, so how far am I from the ants? From this entire mass?
190 pounds of ants is coming at you with ill intent. Do you have a chance in the world?
Oh, I'm in trouble, dog.
You're gonna drown. You'll drown.
Do I have a flamethrower? Do I have people I can call? Is
You're
there
lucky
military?
You're lucky to have shoes. Okay, you have
scientific?
shoes and a belt. All right.
Right.
Yeah.
If I got a can of Raid and my ability to run, I'm in trouble.
You're in trouble. Right.
Yeah,
So back to intent.
I'm between ants and bees as my favorite animals because of that.
But if you talk, Brent, about your initial assertion was because we have the most impact. Imagine if the intent of ants changed to match the intent of humans. We wouldn't stand a chance. So I don't know if we're the dominant species except for our ill intent.
But define dominant then.
Right. Exactly. Thank you.
Because we could get rid of ants before they could get rid of us.
Really? We think so? If they
if we wanted to,
if they matched our intent.
We're talking as they exist today.
Right.
They it's interesting. I listened to an audiobook, Mort, and it was about ants, because their colony is brilliant and the way they do things is brilliant, but somehow they became intelligent and they were able to Became like the queen was hundreds or thousands of years old. So she
Okay.
learned a lot of things and that sort of thing. And she was able to create something where, and they grew too. They were, human sized ants and, had opposable thumbs and that sort of thing, all of that. So, but they were able to wake up all the animals also. So Mort was a cat. And Mort one day was like, I can understand what my master is saying. Like,
This is
not
getting
just the words.
strange.
It was very strange, but it was dope. It was dope as hell too. It was Animal Farm, Lord of the Flies, all
The
type of
birds, the ants, all
yeah,
that, right?
it was very
Dr.
interesting.
Moreau.
Right.
And I think the point of intent is important because even though ants and bees are brilliant in what they do, their only intent is to survive and procreate.
Correct. So
I mean, they and it's like they do have, I mean, I don't know so much ants, but I know sometimes bees play if you but it's ants are very about that business.
right. And so there's the question. I don't know if we'll have an answer, but it's something to sleep on and maybe wake up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night thinking about 190 pounds of ants coming at yourself. That's not good.
Yeah, again, those siafus, those African siafus, they'll strip a cow.
Okay, so before we like end on some note where we terrify that shit out of everybody, let me evolution does not happen in a vacuum. In fact, evolution happens in an extremely intricate set of systems that happen. And the moment something changes slightly in a population, something's going to change drastically in other populations as well. So those of us who live in neighborhoods, so my neighborhood, it was absolutely overrun by bunny rabbits. It was overrun by bunny rabbits, not because of not because of some sort of evolution thing that happened, but because of escaped rabbits that have done research. And now these super rabbits have populated everywhere. You know what else is now very common in my neighborhood? Coyotes. And so just as the rabbits are like, yeah, we winning, coyotes, he's like Wiley's sitting there with the napkin and the fork and the knife, like delicious.
Yeah.
So rabbit carcasses are everywhere. So there's checks and balances to the notion that, for example, ants could immediately or even over time evolve to become super smart because, to your point, once a pack of ants gets together and attacks a human being, you know how we respond. We're going to be like,
we're going to
if
kill
we
every
see ant with extreme prejudice, let any ant exist everywhere. Like we would genetically modify their food and their existence.
Exactly.
So they would die out. You know what I mean? So to that point,
but then we would kill half of us too. So
absolutely. Oh, we
you got to break a couple eggs.
Absolutely. We might wipe out. We might wipe out a quarter of the human population. But man,
congratulations on preventing us from being terrified as we end the show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
And last part's an exaggeration. We would be able to stop it.
This is, and you have been a guest on the Black Futurist podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Brendan Moore. That is Dr. Maurice Dolberry, and that is no longer Chef Brent Hughes, but sometimes Chef Brent Hughes. That's data scientist Brent Hughes.
Parenthetically, Chef Brent Hughes.
There you go. We'll see you guys later, and feel free to join us in October at Howard Homecoming. If you know, you know. Goodbye.
You know.